You've been following someone else's map your entire life. The career path your parents chose for you, the relationship timeline society expects, the version of success that everyone else seems to want. And somewhere along the way, you realized you're completely lost. Not just confused about your next step, utterly profoundly lost about who you are and what you actually want from this life. If you're reading this while feeling like you don't know which direction to go, like every path seems wrong or empty, like you're living someone else's life while your real self remains hidden, then I have news for you. You're exactly where you need to be. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist who mapped the depths of human consciousness, discovered something that most people never realize. Being lost isn't the problem. Fighting against being lost is the problem. Today, I'm going to reveal why your sense of lostness isn't a sign that something's wrong with you, but evidence that something is finally going right. Why the confusion you're experiencing isn't weakness, but the first stirring of authentic strength. And why accepting that you don't know who you are is the only way to discover who you're meant to become. Jung called this experience the dark night of the soul, but he understood it as absolutely necessary for what he termed individuation, the process of becoming your true self rather than the version others expect you to be. Your lostness isn't a detour from your path. It is your path. And the sooner you stop fighting it, the sooner you can begin the real journey toward authenticity. And if these words are hitting something deep inside you, if you recognize yourself in this struggle between who you are and who you think you should be, then subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We're building a community of people who understand that the journey to authenticity requires getting lost first. In the comments, write these 3 words. I accept lostness. Not as defeat, but as the beginning of your real journey. The first reason you must accept being lost is because your current confusion is actually your psyche's rebellion against a life that isn't yours. Jung understood that beneath our conscious personality, what he called the persona or social mask, lies our authentic self, struggling to emerge. That restless, dissatisfied feeling you can't shake. That's not depression or failure. That's your soul refusing to accept a counterfeit life. Most people spend their entire lives wearing masks that were handed to them by family, society, culture, and circumstance. The dutiful child, the successful professional, the perfect partner, the responsible adult, all roles you learned to play so well that you forgot you were performing. But something inside you knows the difference between performance and authenticity, and it will not stay quiet forever. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Whoa, but before you can become who you truly are, you must first acknowledge that you don't currently know who that is. You must admit that the version of yourself you've been presenting to the world, and even to yourself, might be a collection of borrowed identities rather than your authentic essence. This admission feels terrifying because it means acknowledging that you've been living partially or entirely outside of alignment with your true nature. It means facing the possibility that the life you've built, the relationships you've formed, the goals you've pursued, might not reflect your actual desires and values. It means accepting that you might need to disappoint people, change directions, or even start over in some areas of your life. But Jung discovered that this terror is actually the beginning of freedom. When you stop pretending to know who you are, when you stop forcing yourself into predetermined molds, when you admit that you're lost, you create space for your authentic self to finally emerge. The confusion you're experiencing isn't evidence that something's wrong. It's evidence that something real is trying to be born. The second reason you must embrace being lost is because certainty about your identity before you've truly explored it is usually false certainty built on external expectations rather than inner knowing. Jung called this phenomenon identification with the persona, mistaking your social roles for your actual identity. Think about how many people you know who seem absolutely certain about who they are and what they want, but their lives feel hollow or anxious beneath the surface. They've convinced themselves and others that they have it all figured out, but that certainty is often a defense against the anxiety of not knowing, rather than genuine self-knowledge. True self-knowledge requires what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between opposing forces within yourself, without immediately resolving that tension through premature decisions or false certainty. You must be able to sit with not knowing while remaining open to whatever wants to emerge from that unknowing. This is why the people who seem most certain about their path in their 20s often experience major life crises in their 30s or 40s. They built their identity on untested assumptions about what they wanted, and eventually, their authentic self demands to be heard. The midlife crisis isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough that was postponed by false certainty. Your current lostness might be your psyche's way of preventing you from making the same mistake. Instead of building your life on assumptions about who you should be, your unconscious is forcing you to discover who you actually are. This process is uncomfortable, but it's infinitely more reliable than constructing an identity based on external expectations and hoping it will satisfy you. Jung understood that real confidence comes not from knowing exactly who you are, but from trusting your ability to discover who you are as you go. When you accept being lost, you develop what he called the attitude of the explorer, someone who can navigate uncertainty with curiosity rather than panic, who can treat confusion as information rather than failure. The third reason you must accept lostness is because it breaks the tyranny of other people's definitions of success and happiness. When you don't know where you're going, you can't pretend to follow someone else's directions. When you admit you're confused about what you want, you stop trying to want what others want you to want. When you embrace not knowing who you are, you stop trying to be who others need you to be. Jung observed that most psychological suffering comes from what he called the conflict between the individual and collective values. Society offers you a limited menu of acceptable identities and life paths, and you're expected to choose from these predetermined options. But what if none of those options actually fit your unique nature, gifts, and calling? Your lostness might be your psyche's refusal to accept artificial limitations on who you can become. Instead of trying to squeeze yourself into existing categories, your unconscious is demanding that you discover your own category, create your own path, define success and happiness according to your own authentic values rather than inherited ones. This is why people who follow conventional paths sometimes feel successful on paper, but empty in their souls. They achieved what they were supposed to achieve, became who they were supposed to become, but it wasn't who they actually were. Their success was real, but it wasn't theirs. Their happiness was genuine, but it was someone else's version of happiness. When you accept being lost, you give up the security of knowing that you're on the right path according to external standards, but you gain the possibility of finding the path that's right for you specifically. You trade the comfort of meeting others' expectations for the challenge and adventure of discovering your own authentic desires and pursuing them regardless of whether they make sense to anyone else. Jung wrote, "Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. But you can only look inside when you stop looking outside for direction. You can only awaken to your own vision when you stop trying to live someone else's dream." And here's where your journey toward authenticity really begins. When you realize that being lost isn't something to escape, but something to explore. If you're feeling that shift, that recognition that maybe your confusion is actually guidance, then write in the comments, I trust the process, not because you understand where it's leading, but because you're beginning to trust that it is leading somewhere meaningful. The fourth reason embracing lostness is essential is because it activates what Jung called the individuation process, the unconscious drive toward psychological wholeness and authentic self-expression. This process cannot be forced, planned, or controlled. It can only be allowed, supported, and trusted. Individuation is your psyche's natural tendency to grow toward your fullest potential, but it often requires dismantling the false self you constructed to survive and succeed in your family and culture. This dismantling process feels like losing yourself, because in a sense, you are. You're losing the version of yourself that was never really you to begin with. Jung discovered that individuation often begins with what he called the call to adventure, a disruption of your normal life that forces you to question everything you thought you knew about yourself. This might come through a relationship ending, a career becoming unfulfilling, a health crisis, or simply a growing sense that your current life doesn't fit who you're becoming. Your lostness is this call to adventure. Your confusion is your psyche's way of saying, the old maps don't work anymore. You need to explore new territory. Your sense of not knowing who you are is actually the beginning of knowing who you really are, beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation. But individuation requires what Jung called active imagination, the willingness to engage with the unknown parts of yourself without trying to immediately understand or control them. You must learn to have conversations with your confusion, to listen to what your restlessness is trying to tell you, to pay attention to what emerges from the depths of your uncertainty. This is why traditional problem-solving approaches often fail when applied to existential questions. You can't think your way to authenticity. You can't plan your way to your true self. You can't force your way through individuation. You can only create conditions that allow your authentic nature to reveal itself. And the primary condition is accepting that you don't currently know what that nature is. The fifth and most profound reason you must accept being lost is because it opens you to what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to create new solutions, new identities, and new possibilities that weren't available from your previous level of consciousness. When you're certain about who you are and where you're going, you operate from your existing knowledge and capabilities. But when you accept that you don't know who you are or where you're heading, you become available to guidance from deeper sources, intuition, creativity, dreams, synchronicities, and what Jung called the collective unconscious. Jung understood that breakthrough insights and authentic directions rarely come from rational analysis of your situation. They come from a deeper intelligence that operates through symbols, metaphors, emotions, and sudden knowing that can't be explained but can be trusted. But you can only access this deeper intelligence when your rational mind admits it doesn't have all the answers. This is why many people's greatest life breakthroughs come during periods of confusion and uncertainty rather than periods of clarity and control. When the conscious mind stops trying to figure everything out, the unconscious has space to offer its wisdom. When you stop forcing solutions, organic solutions have room to emerge. Your lostness creates what Jung called a sacred space, a psychological environment where something new can be born. Your confusion is actually a form of creativity, your uncertainty a type of openness, your not knowing a kind of receptivity that makes transformation possible. But here's what's crucial. Accepting lostness doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on direction entirely. It means becoming active in a different way, actively listening instead of actively controlling, actively exploring instead of actively forcing, actively trusting instead of actively manipulating. Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." But choosing who to become requires first accepting that you don't yet know who that is. It requires trusting that the process of becoming will reveal the destination, rather than demanding to know the destination before you're willing to begin the process. This is the paradox that most people never grasp. You must lose yourself to find yourself. You must accept not knowing who you are to discover who you're meant to be. You must embrace being lost to find your true path. And you must trust the process of becoming even when you can't see where it's leading. When you truly accept being lost, not as failure but as the beginning of authentic discovery, everything changes. Your anxiety transforms into curiosity. Your frustration becomes patience. Your desperation turns into trust. Your sense of being behind schedule becomes recognition that you're exactly on time for your own unique journey. The path you're meant to walk cannot be found on any map because it's never been walked before. It's uniquely yours, designed specifically for your gifts, challenges, and calling. But you can't find this path by following someone else's directions or by forcing yourself down roads that don't feel right. You can only find it by accepting that you're currently lost and trusting that being lost is the first step toward being found. Jung understood that the goal of human life isn't to avoid confusion, but to transform through it. Not to escape lostness, but to let it guide you toward authenticity. Not to figure everything out, but to become someone who can navigate uncertainty with grace, wisdom, and trust in the deeper intelligence that operates through not knowing. Your lostness isn't a problem to be solved. It's a doorway to be entered. Your confusion isn't an obstacle to overcome. It's a teacher to learn from. Your sense of not knowing who you are isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence that you're finally ready to discover who you really are beneath all the identities you were given but never chose. Subscribe if you're ready to embrace the journey of authentic self-discovery, even when that journey begins with admitting you don't know who you are or where you're going. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being lost is not only okay, it's necessary for finding their true path. And most importantly, trust that your lostness is not random or meaningless. It's your psyche's wisdom, guiding you away from a life that was never truly yours toward a life that could only ever be yours. Your authentic path is waiting to be discovered, but it can only be found by someone brave enough to admit they don't yet know the way. Until you accept being lost, you'll keep trying to follow maps that lead nowhere you actually want to go. But once you embrace the adventure of not knowing, you become available to discover territories of yourself that no map could ever show you. Your true path begins where your certainty ends, and that beginning starts right now.